Hey peeps, Erin Zenwari here. How you doing? Lovely day here in Auckland. We've got that it's already wintry, but it's lovely sunny day, just quite pretty. And there's always a little bit of warmth when the sun is out, which I just love. Anyway, don't forget to follow, do all the things wherever you are that are required to show some love at my end and to help support whatever algorithm is out there playing so that I might be seen by millions of people. Relationship truths. I really love this theme of relationships, and it started, those of you who haven't seen, by the way, I did a discussion with my friend Natalie Cutler-Walsh on her podcast, and I'm going to repost that in my story so you guys can find it. Well worth a little listen about human design and how it can help you with relationships. And it's such an interesting tool about perspective and subjectivity and how we're all just so uniquely different in the way we view the world. And that's the funny thing in relationship, right? There's this idea that you should be like me. And I'm like, that you should see the world like me, that you should approach everything like me. And it's really interesting. I was pondering the fact that when someone comes along who has the 10-20 behavior in the now, and this is such an interesting channel. It's all about upholding people to higher standards. And I often clash a bit with this channel because just because we have circuitry doesn't mean we run it well, if at all. And just because we have a subjective viewpoint about how you should behave or I should behave or whatever it is, doesn't mean that you're right. It just means you have a quality that you bring, a subjective viewpoint that you bring that can be heard. But here's the thing about all of us. We all have this intuitive mechanism of this, avatar, this body. And it is entitled and designed to decide what is correct for its unique self and what isn't. And not everyone is for everyone, and not everyone's viewpoint in this moment is correct for everyone. It's not even a question of right and wrong. There kind of isn't a right and wrong, right? And a lot of people are like, oh, yes, there is. I'm like, right and wrong is, as you understand it, is actually determined largely by social conditioning. So the idea that I should behave a certain way in a relationship, the idea that I am expected to behave like a woman, be particularly receptive, be curious, it's quite amazing what people expect of you. I remember one time, actually, I used to rock climb a little bit, and I remember one time I was I don't know if any of you have rock climber friends, but finding them bouldering around the room is kind of a thing that you might find, especially if they're high or drunk, right? And I was just sort of talking to someone, and I wedged myself in a doorway and kind of jimmied myself up. And I was in England, and I was dating an English guy, and his English friend was there. And do you know, I heard about that particular instance where I wedged my foot on one part of the door and on the other part of the door and wiggled my way up and kind of hung out there for 60 seconds or so, just going, that was fun. I was entertaining myself. Their conversation wasn't particularly interesting to me, obviously. And it was commented on for years after by the boyfriend I dated at the time, because what I did was, as he put it, no one has ever done that kind of thing around me before. And he was horrified. And I was just playing around, and it was no big, to me, it was no big deal. But his perception was that it was huge, that it was bizarre, that it was weird, that it was out of place, that it was perhaps somehow rude. And I mean, I love to be surprised. I've had boyfriends that get high and do headstands on the dining room table because that's what they do when they get high. And I'm like, yeah, they're having a good time, as long as they don't hurt themselves, I'm all good. And to be honest, I love to be surprised. But so many people don't. It's not safe for them. And so because people intrinsically want to feel safe, it's one of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And it's way up there as one of the top ones. And you can argue which one is the most prevalent, but safety is way up there. When people perceive that what you're doing is out of their box, you become unsafe to them. And so what they start doing is they have expectations within those that they let into their sandpit as to how they should be or how they should behave. One of them is, if you love me, you would do this. If you love me, you would say it all the time. If you loved me, you would invite me to things. You would include me with your friends. You would shower me with gifts. You would spend time with me. You would communicate better. You would be curious. You would be, give me a list as long as my arm. I can tell you that at some point, you've probably all heard these things. And I'd love you to comment down below, by the way, and just say things that have been expected of you where you have been perceived by the other to have fallen down, to have not been good enough, right? And I've heard men complain about women letting themselves go. I've also heard men talk about the expectation that they had about what they thought a woman should give them in relationship on a sexual level. And I have to say, boys, it's pretty interesting to hear some of that stuff. But I've also heard women expect of men that they read their mind, for example, or that they should just know what to do, or that a man should subjugate in some way. There are all these expectations. I had an expectation recently of someone that they would be a certain way in a relationship because that's how they were in friendship. Boy, oh boy, did I get slapped by that one. And I didn't even realize that I had that expectation. I knew that I thought that way, but I didn't even realize it was an expectation I had of them because of how they were outside of relationship. And as we entered into relationship, what happened was they kind of inverted and they became the exact opposite of my expectation. And as a result of that experience, I got horribly frustrated also because it was quite unworkable from my perspective, right? What I really wanted was that thing. And what I saw them being able to do in their daily life was that thing. But what was really interesting is that when they got into relationship, for some reason, that completely shriveled up. And I was like, I've taken that pause and gone, that was particularly frustrating for me because I expected. It was particularly troublesome for me because I expected. And here's the thing about expectations. When you have them, you are going to crash down to earth at some point. And when you have them and you throw them at the other, you deeply disrespect the other, right? And so when we're having arguments and we're like, you shoulda, coulda, woulda, you're a dick. And you should stop doing that. You shoulda, coulda, woulda, stop fucking doing that. And why? Because you're deeply disrespecting the other, because you're saying, what I expect of you is how you should be, instead of, I meet you as you are, in all your fuckness, in all your beauty and your shadow, and I see you. And hey, this is hard, it's hard for me to be in this, because it doesn't work for me, is quite different to, I expect you and you should have and you let me down, right? Because who the fuck do you think you are to have such demands on someone else? Their life is their life. No one is made for you. No one is designed for you. And I mean, I get that question all the time with human design, right? People are like, in fact, Natalie in our recent talk asked me, she said, can you get together with human design charts and basically design me a person? And I'm like, you can kind of do that, but ultimately the biggest question is not what design do they have, but are they running their design correctly? Because if they're not running their design correctly, I can create you the perfect man, woman, whatever your thing is. And the reality is if they're out of design, they're not going to be that anyway. They're not going to be in their circuitry. And this is the thing about the world that we live in. We live in a not self world. We live in a world that is a school for souls, which means most of us, 95, 99% of us, 99.9% of us are all finding our way to whatever it means to be self. And some of us don't have any self-definitions. It's not like we know who we are, right? So what does self even become for them? Well, it becomes a playfulness within what self-definition is. But they do have something. I mean, that's the beauty of human design. You can actually see what you are even outside of the realms of self-definition. I'm talking about a circuitry there. But I think the bottom line of what I'm saying here is if you have expectations of the other, expect to be disappointed. That's the one thing I can guarantee you. And if you have expectations of the other, you're a bit of a dick. And you're just like the rest of us, because we all have expectations and sometimes they catch us by surprise, just like mine did recently. And why? Because I deeply wanted that thing. You know, I was like, the next relationship needs to have this to work. And so what happened? Well, that relationship didn't work, right? It got a whisper of an edge of a trial of a whatever, and then it was like, this isn't what I want, you know. And here's the thing I would also say about that. You are entitled to hold out for the experience that you are looking for. You are not entitled to force someone to be it, you know. And you are absolutely within your human experience rights to say, you're a beautiful person, but you're just not, you know, this is just not what I want right now. There's nothing wrong with that. And what's really funny is sometimes as we say that, we see the expectations of the other come up, you know. And I find there are a lot of people out there trying to be the best they can be. I find there's a lot of men out there trying to be good, trying to be worthy, trying to be worth something. And I'm like, you were already worth something. You were worth so much you don't even get it. But the problem with people who are trying so hard is that when you decide that they're not for you, they're deeply offended because they self-sacrifice so much in their attempt to be good enough that when you told them that they weren't good enough, their expectation was that their efforts would be well received. And it's like when you're efforting, you need to make sure that you want to make that effort for yourself and that you're not making it for someone else. Because in the very process of it, it creates a lot of bitterness, frustration, anger, etc., depending on what your not self themes are in this life. And actually what you're doing is you're actually playing a fucked up safety game. You're trying to make yourself the person that you think the other or somebody else might want without even asking them, I might add, what kind of person that they want. And in the process of doing that, you're doing something we call enmeshment, where you self-sacrifice for the other. And then because you've done that, you're now, and this is a very tricky kind of quality that I have also been guilty of, you're the good guy, right? You did everything you could and it just wasn't enough for them because they're fucked in the head. Not, hey, you were so not self. You were so not yourself, trying to be something that was worth loving, that you didn't love yourself. Do you get what I mean? Right? What I'm saying is that instead of thinking you were worth loving as you are, you bent over backwards to make yourself into something for somebody else. And when they rejected it, you got pissed at them about it. What's funny is, in all the circumstances where I have become more myself, I have been more appreciated. And in all the circumstances where I have bent over backwards to make the other happy, to show them how much I love them, however you want to fucking lie about it, they've not appreciated it. And why? Who appreciates anyone not being themselves? Who appreciates anyone giving up their power? When I ask a man, do you want someone who's empowered? Do you know what they say to me? Fuck yeah. I was actually talking to my sword teacher today, and he was talking about Sigourney Weaver in Alien, right? Her character Ripley, and how fucking sexy she was. Not because of what she looked like, but because of who she was. And I said, yeah. And think about Trinity and The Matrix. Everybody loved her. And think about, he also brought up Terminator 2, Sarah Connor, right? The idea of her character being this dynamic, self-empowered, self-sufficient woman. Well, fuck me, boys. If you want, that was not an invitation. If you want a woman like that, what kind of woman like that is going to want a disempowered man that's constantly making himself overly available and self-sacrificing and giving his power away all the time? I mean, it's a no-brainer. You want something in your life, you are going to have to align with the frequency of it. And you want someone to allow you to be who you are, you are going to have to allow them to be who they are. And that means drop your fucking expectations. Have you all got it now? But hey, I made that mistake recently myself, and it was not unconscious. It's a weird one. I was aware of what I had thought was there. What was unconscious about it was I didn't realize I had created it as an expectation of the other. And then when I went into it, I got slapped with the fact that wasn't the reality. And I think, had I actually had a conversation and said, you know, for me, relationship is a lot of conscious communication between two people about where we're at and what we're doing and what we want here. And for me, that is what I'm looking for. If I'd actually voiced that, maybe things would have gone differently. Instead, I've just quietly expected it. And when it didn't happen, unfortunately, that person got slapped in the face with, yeah, no thanks, you know? Anyway, like, comment, oh, Daniel, I try never to say the word should. Yeah, but, you know, like, I hear you, Daniel, but at the same time, like, I try never to say some of these words as well, but it's not like, and that's really valid. But at the same time, trying not to say words is not the same as not actually expecting. Someone did something the other day, and that was really interesting. And it was like, just because you don't say it doesn't mean you're not in it. Doesn't mean, like, yes, when we put words into things, we put power into them. That's true. But just because we don't put words to something doesn't mean we're not doing it. And I think if we're all honest, we all have hopes when we go into a relationship. And if you really look at what a hope is, well, a hope very quickly can turn into an expectation, especially if someone enmeshes into trying to give you what you hope for in the short term, which of course they can't sustain that. So eventually they let you down on that front, and then your expectations come crashing down, you know. So yeah, but thank you for your comment. And yeah, it's important to consider the words, but it's also important to consider what are the words in our head, not just the words that come out of our mouth. Have a great day. Love to hear more from you guys. Talk to you all later. Bye. Oh, and like, follow, and if you haven't heard that interview with me and Natalie Cutler-Walsh, I am going to post it up top. Do check out her website, matchme.com. No, matchme.co.nz. I've got to get that right. It's really quite interesting what she's doing. I'm hoping to make it to one of her events soon. She had one this weekend. Unfortunately for newbies like me who just want to come in and, you know, be a fly on the wall, she didn't have any space left. So I hope to make it to the next one. Ciao.